This is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. Happy to be joined now by Jeremy Plonk, horseplayernow.com. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Seth. How are you?
Very good. Usually you have that slash in between your title, horseplayernow.com, and Night School. But we noted last week, Night School, last session for a while. You're on the winter hiatus now. But no rest for the weary, because here we are, first week into the second week of December. So I'm assuming you're already hard at work on first edition of Road to the Crown.
Yeah, Countdown of the Crown, the preseason annual magazine, is going to come out on the first Friday in January. That'll be January 2nd, 2015. And we are deep in the production of putting the big list together. We've designed the cover. We've got all kinds of stuff going on, a lot going into it. And we're in high mode for that. Back for another run through the Triple Crown and hopefully through the Canadian Triple Crown as well again this year. So lots of stuff going on the business front, the preparation front to get ready for this 3-year-old season. And, that's what really excites me. I know folks in horse racing want to talk about how the industry is much more than just the road to the Triple Crown, but that seems to be the season, and there's defined seasons in horse racing, and that's where we kind of look at it as a professional sports team franchise. To me, that season is defined from January through the Belmont Stakes. After that, horse racing is a little bit different to me. I don't think it's quite a season in a national context, and really becomes, more of a showcase and boutique meets and the outstanding everyday gambling enterprise, which really makes horse racing what it is as a business. But as a sport, and to follow it from afar, and to follow teams and have favorites, and a season, a preseason to the playoffs, to me, it starts with the beginning of January with the Triple Crown chase and all the way through the Belmont.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I've said the same thing a number of times. And I wish on the older division they could come up with something similar. They've tried in the past from time to time. It's just a little bit tougher. But, yeah, that the Triple Crown, I look at the 2-year-old season as that preseason, and the regular season is maybe January, February into March, April, you have the playoffs, and then you get into the Triple Crown, which kind of defines things as a championship event. And so I think it just becomes – it's much more analogous to what people are used to in other sports, and it becomes much more easier for them to follow and kind of plug into, their favorite. In other sports, is maybe your favorite team or your favorite player in some of the other individual sports. But here you can plug into your favorite horse, and I think that plays into the whole thing.
Yeah, and with that, with the older horses, be careful what you ask for, because last year we had the top older horses in the game running the first half of the season. Problem was they weren't around the second half of the season then, So the Palace Malices and the Will Take Charges and the horses like that were running at the same time the Triple Crown races were getting more attention than they were. So, it's one of those. Could you tell the tracks that run the first 6 months of the year not to run any handicap division races? No, and that's why this sport is, it's tough to make a schedule and a pattern on a national basis. But the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont are so big that they can demand what happens the first half of the season. And really, to Churchill's credit, the way they've structured the point series, and they've kind of taken back control of that versus the money that was in it in the past, where a track could just say, okay, our race is worth twice as much as the one next week because we're adding purse money to it. I kind of like the point system in that regard, in that it defines the season a little bit more into which races are more important. You can argue all you want whether Churchill has the right to do that or not, but I think from the outside, I like the definition that becomes of that.
Yeah, again, it definitely makes it fun to follow right from the beginning of the year. All right, let's take a look at some of the, and in fact, we have some 2-year-old races that we'll look at in a few minutes as we move into that countdown to the Crown period. But I wanted to start off last Saturday at Aqueduct, the Garland of Roses, $100,000, fillies and mares, 3-year-olds and up. And I wanted to show this race more to kick off a little discussion on jockeys, because we're going to watch the stretch run here. And number 4, Winning Image, is going to have the lead late, but just get run down by Expression, the number 7 horse. But Winning Image, I said it last week talking about this, also cross-entered in the stakes over at Laurel. And I said wherever Winning Image would go, I would be paying attention, because 63-year-old Tony Black was on board. And Tony had a very nice run on Winning Image in the Garland of Roses. Winds up a little bit of a disappointing second, but still a good effort from this horse, who has been a good combination with Tony Black during her career at various points. And so I wanted to show this because of the 63-year-old Tony Black, a nice second, and kind of tie it into a conversation and get some of your thoughts, because you hear folks talking a lot, how important is the jockey? And some handicappers almost give no consideration. It's all about the horse. I'm a handicapper. I definitely think that the jockey is to be considered, particularly when it's the 1 or 2 or 3 top riders in a particular meet. I think that's an extra check mark for a horse. But in my handicapping, jockeys definitely play into it in some factor. Again, if there's on the other side of the equation, if there's a very good horse, but you have a 3% jockey, that's a negative to me too. So my handicapping, the jockey plays into it. Talk a little bit about when you handicap and where the jockey figures into your formula.
I think the jockey's a major part of it, and I think people want to be so technical in their handicapping, and they want to show off that they're able to decipher this from that. They don't want to take something as simplistic as the jockey, because the jockey will take a lot of money, and probably more money than they should. Julian Leparoux is not going to get let go at a price at Keeneland. John Velasquez is not going to get let go at a price too often in New York. So the value players or the wise guys or the people who want to get more technical with their handicapping might say, well, that's just the easy way out to take the leading riders. But, you think about this. A fifth of a second is 1 length. So every time a jockey hesitates for 1 second, that's 5 lengths. And so most races come down to a winning margin of less than 2 lengths. I think the overall winning margin for all races is probably in that length to length and a half margin of victory. So you're talking about a fifth of a second decision at any point in the race could make the difference between a win and a loss. I don't know how you look at that from a mathematical standpoint. I mean, forget what you think about emotionally about jockeys. Boneheaded ride, whatever. Jockey hesitates for a second and can lose 3, 4, 5 lengths. So I think jockeys are very important. I think the process, trainers want to belittle jockeys. That's just part of the process. They want to belittle the importance of the rider. And the trainer gets the credit. They figure they can put any jockey up they want. They'll go through jockeys like underwear in a lot of situations where a guy gives them a bad ride or doesn't show up to work for a horse, and they're completely out of the barn. There's something to be said for the top riders out there. I think they're really worth something. Now, if you're talking about what's the difference between jockey, 7 in the top 10 and jockey 27, maybe the skill set isn't that big of a difference overall. But again, every decision in every race means a matter of a couple lengths, and these races all come down to a couple lengths. So, the old argument is that, it's horse racing, not jockey racing. You can't pick a horse up and carry him to the finish line. No, you can't. But you sure as heck can slow him down by bad decision-making, and that's just the same. You can't make him run faster, but you can certainly make him run slower. And any indecision a jockey has is worth a few lengths here and there, and that's the difference between winning and losing. So I do factor jockeys in a decent amount. Jockeys that are switching. I love when good jockeys are riding for bad barns. Why would one of the top agents in the game ride for a 7% trainer? Yeah. Because there's something going on in the morning with that horse positively that they know about on the backstretch, and they can get that big rider to ride. One of the greatest angles in all of jockey handicapping. Good jockey on a low percentage barn. That tells you a horse is very live.
Yeah, that's a great point. And there are a lot of times when you can't tell. I mean, we all look at those races. Oh, the big jockey was on this horse before, and now he's over here. And those are decisions that behind the scenes, you can make a guess, but you don't always know. But on the one you're talking about, when the jockey is riding for the low percentage barn, yeah, something behind the scenes went on that attracted his attention, and that can certainly factor into your handicapping. And I think you're in the same spot I am on this topic, but I'm always amazed when I read people, as you say, it's horse racing, not jockey racing, and they kind of discount. Again, that middle of the pack jockey, I don't know whether you can make a decision for or against, but I think on either end, you look at a meet, typically some smaller tracks, they could kind of even out, but most racetracks, there's probably a top 2 or 3 or maybe 5 that just have an edge on the rest of the jockeys in the colony. And then on the other end of the equation, there are a couple that just don't seem to ride well. And over the years, having interviewed jockeys myself, I know there are some of them who really put in the work that the everyday guy isn't doing. You get the top jockeys who will say, yeah, I was home the night before and I watched the tapes and I looked at the past performances and I knew so-and-so was going to do this or that. And I just think that makes a difference, and I don't think you can ignore the fact that some are higher percentage. It's like in other sports. You look at some coaches, they just do well, regardless of what team they're coaching or what players they have, they do very well. And it's just, I think, innately, they're better than the other guys, and I think that's the same with jockeys.
And it's like athletes, like you're talking about, and coaches. There's the decision making that goes into it. What makes a great quarterback? You could be a guy who's 6'5", stand in the pocket with a rocket arm and be terrible. And then you can be a guy who's not as athletic as some others, but you've got the cerebral side of it, and you make up for some of that athleticism. No difference with jockeys. And I remember talking to Jerry Hollendorfer a couple years ago when I had him as part of the Derby Notes team when he had Blind Luck in for the Oaks, and I was covering that filly every morning. When you go around to a barn 7 days in a row to talk to the trainer, you run out of stuff to talk to him about when you're doing the notes writing. So Jerry and I got off onto a lot of different topics about horseshoes and jockeys and everything. And he mentioned to me, Bejarano is such a good rider because he studies the tape. I said, well, a lot of guys study tape. He said, no, you'd be surprised. I said, well, give me a number. Estimate how many jockeys in your experience do you think actually study the tape and study the past performances? He said 20%.
Yeah.
1 out of 5 riders knows what they're doing when they look at the past performances or a videotape and can apply that. That's pretty significant. He's talking on the Northern and Southern California circuits where he's most familiar, and it's probably true around the way. If there are, the top 20 in the standings, that means 4 guys are really out there, or 4 gals out of the top 20 who are really applying the coaching and the cerebral side of it to go along with the athletic talent.
Yeah, and again, that then leads into the race where they kind of have a feel for the other horses in the race, the other jockeys in the race. They can. I look at it as these guys who study and really are cerebral about the game. They're a couple jumps ahead. They're a couple moves ahead on the race. They're going down the backside. They've already figured out what's going to be happening on the far turn, and so they're already planning ahead. And I just think that makes a huge difference.
And again, like we talked about, indecision, 1 second is 5 lengths. This guy hesitates for a second. He doesn't lose 5 full lengths because he didn't go back to 0, but he loses 2 or 3, and that costs you races a lot of times. Do you go wide and continue momentum, or do you stay inside and save ground and risk being stopped? Those are the split-second decisions, and knowing the other riders in the race. Oh, Dominguez is in front of me, and he's not going to give me the rail. You know that Dominguez is the rider in front of you. He's on a decent horse, and so you go wide. You know darn well Ramon's not giving you the rail, so you've got to go around him. Folks who aren't as experienced or aren't prepared for those kind of situations may get stuck in behind them.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's shift our attention back to the races. And as I say, we had 3 two-year-old races, some smaller stakes. But again, it's that time of year when I'm sure you're taking an extra look at some of these 2-year-olds and planning as you put together the countdown to the Crown package that'll kick off the year and how these horses might plug in or might not plug in. Let's kick things off, go down to Parks and watch the Pennsylvania Nursery. The Pennsylvania Nursery is a state-bred race, but it's notable in that it has produced some very nice 3-year-olds in the past. $100,000 purse, 7 furlongs. Awesome Alex, a son of a Fleet Alex, I thought was a little bit interesting with maiden, but a career record, a couple of second places and a third place in 4 career starts. The favorite in here is the number 8 horse, Flagandini. Went off as the 2-to-1 choice. Will wind up a disappointing 8th in here off a nice career debut maiden special weight victory, but again, disappointed on Saturday. But the winner, number 5, NASA. NASA, a son of Smarty Jones, and as I said, this Pennsylvania Nursery has produced some nice runners in the past. One of them was Smarty Jones. For these very same connections, John Service training NASA, and we'll watch the number 5 NASA get it done pretty nicely as the 2-to-1 second choice on Saturday. What are your thoughts of him going forward?
Oh, he looks a lot like Smarty Jones. And being a Pennsylvania bred myself, I'm a bit of a homer there. One of my all-time favorites, I got to say. But, he looked visually a little bit like Smarty Jones in the size that he's not a big, massive kind of horse. Similar coloring, the white bridle, the Someday Farm silks, Pat Chapman. And so there was a lot there to like. This is a May 11th foal, so this is a late foal who's come along and become a stakes winner late in the year. That's a good sign, a good developer. Very professional in here, and I think the horse galloped out well. The ears were up, and visually, there was some remembrances there towards Smarty Jones. We'll see if John Service goes the Arkansas route with this runner over the course of the winter. I would think that would probably be logical. There's some pedigree here. I mean, obviously, he's by Smarty Jones. We know that. Out of a Seattle Slew mare. That means undefeated Kentucky Derby winners as the sire and the dam sire. Smarty Jones was the first undefeated Derby winner since Seattle Slew, so there's a lot to go there. And in the pedigree, the mare, Shoot for the Stars, she didn't race, but she has already been a Blue Hen mare. This is a full brother of the Grade 1 winning sprinter Central Intelligence. And the dam is a half to Fantastic Cat, a horse who won the Super Derby going long. So there's some sprint brilliance. There's a little bit of endurance in the pedigree. Obviously, you got the Seattle's Blue on the dam side. Fantastic cat, the dam being a half to. So there's some interest here. We'll see how far the horse can run. Smarty Jones wasn't bred to run, super long out of a smile mare. We all thought the distance would catch up with him. But this is the kind of interesting, fun horse that we like this time of year. Maybe he'll prove to be something special. Maybe he'll prove just to kind of be a genetic footnote in that Smarty Jones from the Pennsylvania nursery, and so did his son. This is also a race that produced hard spun. So this is a good race, when you get the right horse come along. And a good horse can come from anywhere. We talk about, okay, it's a Pennsylvania-bred horse and a Pennsylvania-bred race. But again, we're talking about a full brother to Central Intelligence, a dam sire being Seattle's Blue. The state-bred monikers that we used to think of in the past aren't the same anymore. The rules on what makes a state-bred and not a state-bred are different than they used to be. These horses are so much better bred than a Pennsylvania-bred would have been 20 years ago. And so there's a lot to like and there's a lot to look forward to, and I really hope he shows up at Oaklawn because this is the kind of fun horse I like to follow.
Yeah, he could be very interesting, and as you say, the dams shoot the stars, hence the name NASA. And this one did break the maiden against Open Company over at Laurel, so has tried Open Company already. And notable that the 2 wins were at 7 furlongs. The 2 losses on the resume, 6.5 and 5. So maybe the longer the better for this one. We'll find out as the career progresses. All right, let's go down to Tampa on Saturday for the inaugural. $100,000. Again, 2-year-olds, this time going 6 furlongs. The favorite in here, again, like in the Pennsylvania nursery, the favorite disappoints. Supreme Justice, who had started the career with 3 big wins at Indiana Downs. Last time before this race, a 4th and a stake at Indiana Downs. But I think those 3 wins attracted some attention, and they sent the bettors sent this one off, Supreme Justice, as the 5-2 choice. But he'll run 8th in the field of 9. I was kind of surprised. I admit, I'm a buyer player. The buyer numbers factor into my handicapping. So the fairly light numbers as compared to some others in this field for Supreme Justice kind of surprised me that this one went off the favorite. But got winged with a New York bred coming in from the NYRA circuit. I found a little bit interesting. And that one winds up a disappointing 7th. Catalina Red will wind up being the winner in here. And Catalina Red was a maiden coming into this event, but off the last race, a pretty good 80 buyer figure in a 2nd place finish over at Gulfstream Park West. Daniel Centino gets on board. He always rides well when he's over at Tampa Bay, and it will be the number 4 Catalina Red winning in here and doing it pretty easily as the 5-2 second choice. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, I like him going into the race. I had a good day on Saturday. We put the 8 best stakes picks in the country in our Bloods report for HorsePlayerNow.com, and we went 6 for 8 on top, including this one. Was a really good day for us. And Catalina Red, there's 2 reasons I liked him. One was the jockey angle that we talked about earlier. Here's where a horse comes in from Gulfstream West, he's shipping in, and he gets the leading local rider. Daniel Centeno gets the call. That's a great sign. The trainer in this case, Chad Stewart, not the kind of guy who lures Centeno every race. And so, this horse was live. The other thing that I liked, where you talked about you like the buyer figures, one thing that I've become growingly more familiar with and confident in are the pace figures from Briss. I use the Briss past performances, and the late pace figures, which tell you how the horse finishes up in a race, are numerical. They're not subjective. So if the horse closed from 6th to 2nd, everybody says, wow, what a rally. But a lot of times the late pace figures, the whole race quick, and then a horse may close from 6th to 5th, but have really run fast on the back end of the races. Catalina Red had been running really fast on the back end of races and just catching horses at Gulfstream Park West that he couldn't get to. In this race, it was a weak edition of the inaugural. The trainer was willing to put the maiden in off those good finishes and then lure the local leading rider. That was enough to pull me in, and a lot of other folks, too. This was the 5-2 second choice. 3 horses went off 5-2 in the race. But Catalina Red won like a good thing, legitimately fast. Stakes record time, 109.32. But he's 5 Munnings out of a Freud mare. This is a sprinter who's not going to run far. He could be a nice horse at Tampa in the sprint ranks and maybe one for the Swale when they get back to Gulfstream and Gulfstream proper for that race later in the spring. A nice sprint prospect, certainly not a horse for the Triple Crown, though.
Yeah, and those pace figures you mentioned, that's interesting because I don't use anything like that, but I go back to my early days when I first got into the game. On the harness side, if you look at the harness pass performances, they always show the last quarter mile for the harness horses, which is when I was doing really into that game, that was a huge factor. So why wouldn't it be a huge factor on the thoroughbred side as well? So those late pace figures, certainly something that maybe I'll plug in, or I'll test. I'll experiment with those now.
Well, that's good. I mean, look, we all learn this stuff. You know, I used DRF my whole life until about 2 years ago, and then converted over to the Brisk side for business and personal reasons, and got more familiar with the product. We were using a lot of it in night school, and so you've got to familiarize yourself with it. And once you do, you find things you like and you're comfortable with. Some of the numbers for Brisk I really don't care for. You know, some of the class ratings and things like that, they don't really rock my world. It's something I want to incorporate into my handicapping. But I do enjoy the early pace figures and the late pace figures from Brisk, and they work for me, you know, in terms of trying to evaluate how fast or how slow a horse might be on the back end of races. In this particular case, it helped out, and you're never too old to learn. I picked up that in my 40s. So, you know, that's what's great about this game.
All right, let's shift our attention out to the Gold Rush out at Golden Gate on Saturday. $75,000, 1 mile. Again, we're looking at 2-year-olds. And this race was kind of fun and interesting in that it attracted a Ken and Sarah Ramsey runner for Joe Sharp, Rosie Napravnik's husband, who's gotten off to such a hot start. The Daily Racing Form stats on these past performances, obviously he's had a couple of days of racing since then, but he's showing 40%. And I guess you get tied in with Ken Ramsey, your percentages are going to be pretty good. But they ship Broughton Kitten out from a third-place finish in an allowance event in the second career start at Churchill Downs, had broken the maiden in the career debut at Indiana. Broughton Kitten winds up going off at 7-2, and as the number 3 horse will wind up second in here. The favorite was Unblunted, coming off a big maiden breaker at Santa Anita back in the middle of October. Unblunted winds up to be a disappointing 5th in here as the even money favorite. The winner going to be number 5, Stand and Salute. Stand and Salute with 3 career starts before this, had broken the maiden just in the previous start in an off-the-turf event at Golden Gate, so showed an affinity for this track. Stand and Salute, Russell Bays, Jerry Hollendorfer. What were your thoughts coming out of the Gold Rush?
Well, coming out of the race, I was happy as I was going into it, because I took Stand and Salute, and the reason being was all these out-of-towners coming in are going to attract money, and it's going to drip the price up on good old Bays and Hollendorfer. And you know that's the staple in Northern California. It's exactly what happened. The horse ended up paying $13 to win, and Broughton Kitten, you know, came running on at the end. But this is one of those visual races where you say, wow, Broughton Kitten, if there had been a little bit more distance, would have went by. In the gallop out, Stand and Salute broke away from him and never got passed by Broughton Kitten. This was one of those races that had some big names. You know, Doug O'Neill's team bringing in a horse. You had a Santa Anita winner from McCarthy's barn coming north. So there were horses in there to take some action. It's the unofficial kickoff to the road to the El Camino Real Derby, the big race in February at Golden Gate. This race, you know, I don't know that, you know, this is going to be the telltale for who's the absolute best horse in Northern California. It kind of slowed a bit every quarter. 25.50 the last quarter in a mile race on synthetic isn't super fast, and it was a dream trip. I mean, Stand and Salute got a dream run, saved the ground, the path opened up in the 2-hole, slid by the pacemaker, and went on to the win. Nice win. You know, we'll see how these horses shake out for Northern California. You know, the interesting thing here is Ramsey goes west, you know, and so that's something that is, in this era of dwindling synthetics, you know, what is Ken Ramsey going to do with all these kittens now? And so they can run on the turf, but there's not that many great turf stakes races. You know, there's only so many Palm Beaches and Kittens Joy stakes down at Gulfstream that you can run in. You know, the Black Gold at Fairgrounds. There's not a lot of places to go with these horses with synthetic pedigrees as 3-year-olds. So you could see Ramsey, you know, pretty much support the system up at Golden Gate through the El Camino Real Derby and try to, you know, see what happens this year. I think the Spiral, and I don't want to get too far off the path here, but I think the Spiral at Turfway this year could have one of its best fields ever, because Keeneland is gone now from the dirt, from the poly track. So all those horses who are coming out of the Palm Beach and the Kittens Joy and those good grass pedigrees, all the Grand Motion horses and stuff we're used to seeing at Gulfstream come north, they're going to end up in the Spiral, and the Spiral is 6 weeks out from the Derby. Trainers want more time than ever away from the race. I think the Spiral is kind of poised to have one of the best fields we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but I'm sure you're exactly right. With Keeneland now out of the mix as far as the poly track, that will boost the Spiral. It'll be interesting this year. All right, Jeremy, got to wrap things up. We got just a minute left. I want to throw you a little curveball on some news that I read this morning and just get your take, because the University at Arizona Racetrack Industry Program Symposium, Racing and Gaming Symposium, kicked off yesterday. and some of the topics that were tossed out there, field size and whatnot. I said yesterday, there are probably, 3 or 4 of these conclaves every year. You throw in the Jockey Club Roundtable up at Saratoga and the simulcast symposium and whatnot. And there are great discussions. I don't know whether we really get a lot of action often out of them, but yesterday's, the follow-ups, again, some interesting discussions out in Arizona yesterday. As I say, field size was one of them, but also social media. And Dave Grenig and Maggie Moss were on a panel. And from what I read, Grenig noted that in New York now, there's a couple of reporters and a handicapper in the press box on a daily basis. It's really dwindled, the coverage. And he said, it would behoove racetracks themselves to start using social media more. But they have to report the bad news as well as the good news. When they talk about a horse doing well, they also have to talk about the horse that comes up with a little ding and won't be running in the big stakes race this weekend or whatever. So they have to balance it, but they should use it more. And Maggie Moss mentioned how she wakes up every morning now and checks Twitter for her racing news. Talk a little bit about, you've been around the game probably close to what I have, and talk a little bit about how the racing news industry has changed for you over time and how you now consume some of your news on a daily basis.
Oh, it's changed everything. I'm a journalism major and graduate and got into the game to, write and cover racing, and there's no marketplace for it. So you simply have to change up, yourself. You change with the times with the Equidaily website, because that is kind of where we've become with an aggregator sites and things like that on the internet. Look, there are no turf writers in America. Even Jenny Reese, the Louisville Courier-Journal, part of the year gets put on a furlough, and part of the year gets put on a situation where she has to go cover other sports now. And so it is just difficult for racing to get coverage in newspapers. But newspapers are dying. Let's not kid ourselves, So that's the same whether it's high school football or whatever. It's all stringers now. Nobody has beat writers for anything. So it has changed. It has gone to social media. The problem with social media, or the downfall with social media, is there's no accountability in editing.
Yeah.
People can put up anything they want. Juan Saez, died 5 hours before he actually died, if you read Twitter, and so you've got to watch what goes on there, and there's not responsibility, and there's a lot of irresponsibility out there, and there's a lot of negative conversation, and that's why the tracks are going to be slow in really utilizing social media. They're going to put out a promo and say, don't forget to come out this week because it's, free tankard day or free T-shirt day. But they're not going to get in and engage conversations with people because, look, people feel bulletproof on social media. They'll come out and say anything they want, as negative as they want. There are people who just rip things to shreds, accuse jockeys of being drunk and, and things like that left and right. As a corporation, you can't get in and engage in that kind of stuff. So I think with the Twitter and the social media, it's got to stay more independent if you want to get into the socialization of it. For the tracks to get involved in the social media, very difficult for them because, look, they've got a lot at stake, and the conversations, quite frankly, turn sour often on social media, and the tracks can't get involved in that. You can't air your dirty laundry in public. I don't care what business you are.
Yeah, it's definitely a conversation that is worth having at this point because just on a broader aspect, and you and I should have a conversation sometime because as a journalism major, I like to hear your take. I've said for the last couple of years, how do you follow your local common council, the school board? How do you learn about a new restaurant if your local newspaper goes out of business? So something has to fill that void. But on the racetrack side, if some of these smaller tracks now have nobody up in the press box, who's watching out for the betting public with some of these bigger issues? At the big tracks, you hear about the situation where the steward made a wrong call or something. Something happens on track, but when nobody's watching, who's the advocate for the bettor? So it's a discussion that is certainly worth having as we move forward here. But Jeremy, got to move on now. We certainly appreciate the visit as always. Horseplayernow.com, and again, we're only a few weeks away from the first countdown to the Crown package. We look forward to that, and we look forward to talking to you next week.